We are going on a journey to explore temptation, compulsion, and addiction. On this journey, we're going to tell the story of 6 friends, 6 individuals. They are Sasha, there's Scott, there's Kimberly, there's Nathan, there's Heidi, and there's Camille. They're going to introduce themselves to you briefly, but they're my heroes. The reason they're my heroes is that they're going to share things transparently for your benefit, things that at times are certainly uncomfortable to them, and frankly at times may be uncomfortable to you. Sasha, introduce yourself, and I understand you left a supervisor's job at Starbucks.
Yes, I was a shift supervisor for 3 years. I just left my job a couple days ago, my last day.
And what do you want to do?
I would like to become a doctor. I'm currently at San Jose City College, and I'm majoring in biology. And I only have 2 semesters left, and I'm applying in the fall for a university down south.
Great. And you're single, and you have a boyfriend. Scott, tell me something about yourself.
I'm a high school teacher and a professional photographer.
You have the indescribable job. Could you just try and describe it to me again for the 20th time, and I still don't get what you do? What do you do?
I teach agriculture and leadership to high school students in the public school system.
So you teach farmers how to give a speech?
Yeah, without using y'all or reckon or yonder or any of that stuff.
In Northern California?
Yeah, a little all over the place.
Okay. Kimberly, tell me a few things about yourself.
I'm married, I have 2 children, and I also have 2 theology degrees. So I teach a biblical Hebrew course, and I also write Bible studies and teach them.
And you also used to teach something else.
I am a retired pastry chef.
And you taught pastry, I believe.
Yes, I taught pastry and a lot more.
Nathan, tell me about yourself.
I'm an electrician, and I also lead an art team at my church, and I just got married within the last year.
To whom?
To my wonderful wife, Bonnie.
And she's a musician too.
Yes, she plays piano at our church in 2 different bands.
Heidi.
Yes.
Tell us something about yourself.
Just one thing? I'm just kidding.
Several.
I'm a mom, first and foremost, and my son's 6.
And I've met him blowing by at about 110 miles an hour.
Yes, he has lots of energy. And I'm a personal trainer, so I do that full time.
Wonderful. Camille, tell us a few things about yourself.
I'm married and I stay at home with my 2 kids, and I'm a worship leader at our church for high school ministries.
What were you doing last night?
I was giving a concert with our band called Unveiled for about 300 high school students. It was just a worship night. It was cool.
What instruments do you play? Do you sing?
Yes, I sing and I play the guitar and the piano.
Now, I've heard you sing, and you've got a pretty powerful voice.
Thank you.
Sasha, we're going to start interviewing you, and we're going to look at a previous interview that you've done. So let's take a look.
My home life between 1 and 5 was extremely chaotic. My father would beat my mom constantly. The abuse was pretty severe. My dad, while my mother was pregnant, he took her by the neck and he was dragging her down the stairs while she was pregnant. Then he would also cheat on her as well when he would leave months at a time. When my parents divorced, they had, the courts decided that we would have joint week to week. So I would live with my father for 1 week and I lived with my mom for 1 week. And my dad, hotel was located in Los Banos. There was a lot of drunk people around, people that were on drugs around that were tenants within the hotel, which we grew up around. I would play cards with the drunks and the druggies. They were my playmates. Between the ages of 7 and 14, I was molested at 7. Between probably 7 and 14, after the first occurrence, it was indirect, but still I categorize it as molestation. I was extremely angry, and I didn't really feel, I don't think I really felt loved and adored. I definitely knew there was something wrong with me, especially since my mom would tell me. She would tell me a lot, because I would have a lot of tantrums and kind of freak out on people. But I couldn't really get help because I didn't want to put my family through another court system.
Sasha, that was hard for me to watch. I come out of a chaotic family background, and some of the things you described were a little bit too familiar. But when you look at that part of your life, what was the roughest part?
Probably the molestation.
The molestation. Why?
Just because that was directly towards me. I don't know.
What emotions did it bring into your life?
It brought a lot of fear. I had thought that I did something wrong and that I was going to get in trouble.
You did something wrong and that you would get into trouble. And how old were you at the time?
7.
7.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7. And the fear was wrapped around that.
Yeah.
You would get into trouble, you had done something wrong, and it was just absorbed. And that created the pain, the fear. What was part of the fear? That it would impact your family in some way?
As I got a little bit older and I saw, because we had been through a court case when I was like 9, where, social workers came in and stuff like that. And so I saw that happening. And if I had mentioned anything, that would tear the family apart once again. And we didn't need to deal with that. So I just didn't think.
So you accepted the responsibility in a heartbreaking kind of way of being human glue by not saying anything. Well, in the teaching segment, we're going to talk about an equation. And the first part of the equation is unaddressed pain in the life. So let's turn our attention to that segment.
Addiction is the misuse of the good gifts of God. If you went to a ladies' weight reduction class or seminar, it's the best place in the world to get good recipes, low-calorie recipes. And all the time what they're discussing is food and how much they enjoy food. The problem is the calories. The problem is the weight reduction. But the reality is that food is a good gift and it's openly acknowledged by everybody there. If you went to a class or a group, a accountability group where men are struggling with sexual addiction, with pornography, there's an undercurrent that would not be admitted by the men there. And that undercurrent is that sexuality is good. It's a gratifying experience. It's a good gift of God. If we followed Julie, who goes from store to store, just buying things, spending her time shopping to deal with the anxieties of her life by pouring herself into acquisitions. If we followed her into her home, we would see lovely furniture, a beautifully done home. But the downside of it is the credit card bills, the strain with her husband, the strain with finances. But nobody would question Julie's good taste or the fact that she certainly knows how to put herself together and how to put a home together. Or Jose, he's occupied with exercise. He is actually hooked on exercise. Exercise is an hour in the morning or plus, more time. In the evening, an hour or more. He's in great shape, but his marriage is in bad shape. He's so preoccupied with exercise that he's neglecting his wife. And when the divorce papers are served on him, he'll be in perfect health. Addiction is the misuse of that which is good. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31 says it. And God saw all that he had made, and look at it. Behold, it was exceedingly good. Everything that God has made is good. Satan cannot create a gnat or really move an atom. Instead, he misuses that which is good in life to our detriment. The challenge here is to really learn how to manage our inner life so that we can use the good gifts of God. We'll also be looking at another good gift. It's an odd gift. It's a special gift. It needs to be taken care of carefully. And it is the gift of pain. Go with me to Adam and Eve. They're walking through the garden. Adam stubs his toe on a rock, and he goes, ouch. Eve looks at him and says, do that again. So he stubs his toe again, and he goes, ouch. It's the first time that he has experienced pain in his existence. And Eve goes, wow, that is incredibly creative. That's pain, that's what we'll call it. And that tells us that we have something we should attend to, something we should be careful about, something we should watch out for. That thing, pain, is a special gift. Now, pain really did exist in the garden before the fall. You can see this implied in Genesis 2. God took Adam through a zoo and kept asking him, do you want this animal to be your helper, the significant helper like unto God, someone to fill the loneliness of life? And as Adam looked at these animals and God asked him, do you want this animal as a helper? Adam would answer, no, no, no. And as he answered no, his loneliness would increase with every time he said the word. No, 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 and lonelier he got, and he felt the pain of loneliness, and that pain should be met by relationship. That is what Adam did when he got Eve. The pain of loneliness was solved. Pain is a good gift, and we'll learn how to use it, and we'll learn how crucial it is. This is the definition of addiction that we're working with. Pain. Unaddressed pain in the life plus pleasure equals addiction. The heart hates pain. So when a person's in pain, they will either shut it down if they can, or they'll drown it in a pleasure. And when that pleasure is repeatedly addressed to an unaddressed pain, it ends up setting up addiction. It's as if pain is a magnet that just pulls pleasure to it. And if we don't handle pain correctly, we end up succumbing to temptation, compulsion, and addiction. Deficits in the life lead to addiction. So we will explore the good gifts of God, and when we're all done, we'll know how to manage this wonderful world that God has provided for us, and also how to manage our own insides.
The equation that we've just looked at is pain plus pleasure equals addiction. We've seen the first part of Sasha's story, and we've seen the first part of the equation, which is pain. Now we're going to see the other two parts of the equation come into play.
At the age of 10, I started to get into more so pornography. My imagination kind of took off. I pretty much had a fetish with sex. That's all I thought about. And so I was flipping through HBO and different channels, and I saw a TV station, and so I would just watch pornography from there. I definitely think that the pornography and the imagination was a way for an escape. It was fun for me. It was enjoyable, and well, all of this other things that were going on, all this chaos, and me and my emotions, and it was a way for me to escape. It was a way for me to have fun.
The equation that we're working with is pain plus pleasure equals addiction. We need to slow down and really think about that. That is significant. It's incredibly important to get that equation right. So what we're going to do is observe the experience of combat soldiers in Vietnam and see what they did with their stress.
Yeah, I mean, I smoke dope to deal with the pressures of war. You think you're just going to you think you're going to die.
In the 1970s, Doctors Robbins, Helzer, and Davis conducted a study of drug usage by military personnel.
I was in Vietnam from May of '67 to probably June or July of '68.
Of a random sample of men returning home from Vietnam in September of 1971, approximately half tested positive for drug usage.
We were stationed in Duc Pho, Chu Lai Way, and A Shau Valley, and they were all hot spots when we went in.
The researchers interviewed all the men in the sample groups.
Usually we were around the first to go in those spots because we were like the spearhead. I believe in 1967 and the 68 was probably the highest percentage of combat that we had. I think that was probably the year where most of the Americans, the KIAs, which were killed in action, and the MIAs missing in action, and the WIAs, the people that were wounded in action, I think that was probably the heaviest year. Every corner you turned, there was going to be a firefight, there was going to be a large battle. The Tet Offense, which was the old capital of Vietnam, it was up north. We were sent up there, and the problem is what's scariest was usually when you confront an enemy, they're coming at you in a certain way. They're coming at you one way. Well, up there, they were everywhere. They were in a circle, out of a circle, on a perimeter, in a perimeter, everything. Everything was a hot zone. I think probably more guys got killed with friendly fire in the battle away than probably any other battle, because everything was a kill zone. Something lights up and the water hits you and jumps up, and you know they're firing at you. We would return fire in that direction. I still remember today how dry my mouth was. I would be drinking water, and as soon as it stopped, my mouth would just get dry. And that dryness was fear. We had a lot of men go down, a lot. I almost figured between 500 and 800. And usually we would have that in a month to the whole country. Vietnam was very stressful for me when I first went in. You go over there as a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old, and you walk into reality and you understand, like the man told me, he said, you got a whole country here trying to kill you.
Researchers found that prior to arriving in Vietnam, hard drug usage among soldiers was largely casual, and less than 1% had any drug addiction.
Yeah, I mean, I smoked dope to deal with the pressures of war and the stress. You know, and I got hooked on it, and you know, that's just the way I was.
Once in Vietnam, almost half of the men tried drugs, and 20% reported having a drug addiction.
When I started taking the dope to relieve the stress and the fear that I was over there, I was able to go to sleep. I was able to function, eat, not walk around all knotted up. It just more or less relaxed me and took some of that fear away. The fear is, you know, it's the unknown. I've never been in an action, I've never been in combat, I never had anybody shoot at me in my life. And when I'm over there, it was all this was going to happen, you know. And you got to kill people, you got to do what you got to do. The chaos over there was just very immense. And that we were soldiers and we had to act under orders, and I was just real fearful of that, stressful, that I would fail in front of my fellow men. It was just like walking in a dream, you know, but it's not like a nice dream.
After leaving Vietnam, drug usage and addiction among soldiers decreased to pre-war levels.
2 studies were done on combat soldiers in Vietnam, and they were done on soldiers who became addicted to heroin in Vietnam. The Army had extensive programs to deal with those soldiers who developed drug habits in combat. And they also tracked them after they came over to the United States. They tracked 2 large groups of heroin addicts who came to the United States, and they found an astonishing thing. In a 10-month period, 95% of those heroin addicts who came out of Vietnam, 95% of them dropped the habit. It is an astonishing percentage that both of those studies found. What's the reason for it? Well, it's the kind of therapy that they received in the States, and it's called no bullets therapy. Nobody was shooting at them. Nobody was dying. They weren't scared to death. They were back in their own homes. They were around people they felt safe with, and 95% of them dropped the habit. Only 1 out of 20 kept the habit. Those figures are almost on the level of the miraculous, but they underscore the principle. Pain plus pleasure equals addiction. Their pain was drowned by the heroin, and when the pain decreased, the need for the addictive behavior dropped away. A natural question arises. What is so good about alcohol and drugs and heroin? Let's go on a simple excursion into chemistry. When people are in healthy attachments, just good relationships, what's produced is oxytocin and vasopressin. When people are involved in fun and romance, what is produced is dopamine and serotonin. When people are in healthy sexual relationships, what is produced is the chemical testosterone. All of those chemicals come out of the natural, healthy relationships of life. But you can do an end run on relationships and get those same chemicals. In fact, you can drown in those chemicals. Gambling, alcohol, drugs produce serotonin and dopamine. Meth produces an abundance of dopamine, serotonin, and epinephrine. The person is just drowned in it to the point where they're driven into ill health. They're so preoccupied with getting the super pleasure of meth. Or pornography will produce the needed testosterone that the addict wants. And some research has shown that a good case of narcissism can produce vasopressin, that healthy relationship chemical, and also oxytocin. An end run on relationships, pursuing addiction, can get those good chemicals that God has created. But the best way of all to get them is in a healthy relationship with other people and with God.
Growing up, I did not think that I was attractive at all. In my early teen years, I was pretty much ignored. I wasn't really treated very well. That's the time when your friends are, they're being liked, and that's where boys and girls, they have that attraction. And so I wasn't treated very well. I was called names. I remember we were playing Swim the Bottle, and it was my turn. And instead of a guy kissing me, he spit in my face instead. From the time that I was like 16 to the time that I was 17, I was partying a lot. I was drinking a lot. I was smoking weed a lot, at least 4 times a week. I was using it as a way to escape. I was not comfortable with myself and all the self-esteem issues, all the issues that I had, and kind of just escaping. All through this time did I want to get sexually involved with the guy, just waiting for that moment that I was just going to be able to be sexually involved with a guy. And I didn't do it. And it's really ironic. But it shows that it was all in my imagination, and I wanted to keep it in my imagination. Using the imagination and pornography, that it was safe, and it was definitely a reliever of my pain that I was going through. It was a way to escape. Looking back on it, because I was molested and there were different reoccurrences, I was I was definitely scared.
There's just so many things in what you've shared that I think need to be pulled apart. One of them is the irony, the absolute irony, that pornography and sexual fantasy can be a flight from relationships. And I think this is both for men and women. People are just messy. And to pull them into our lives, they could do dangerous things, as you described. And so it's safe. It's safe and it gives pleasure. But let me do some nosy research. You mentioned pot, I think you mentioned alcohol, you mentioned smoking, and you mentioned sexual fantasy. Those are 4 different addictive types of behaviors. Of those 4, what was the most forceful inside of you?
Probably weed.
Weed. And what kind of impact did that have on you?
Smoking pot, it made me extremely fearful and extremely paranoid.
So that had a powerfully negative impact on you.
Yeah.
Why'd you do it?
It was more, sometimes it would give me pleasure at the moment, but it was more of a social thing. I would do it with my friends, and then once I got home or alone, I would be really fearful and paranoid, and I wouldn't be able to sleep, or it would just freak me out.
So it was risky.
Yes, it was risky.
And what gave the most powerful positive impact on you?
Porn, definitely.
The porn. Mm-hmm. And that was completely controllable then. Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting when you think about it. The chemical we ingest, the weed, is a roll of the dice. Mm-hmm. You might end up feeling paranoid, terribly frightened, fearful, anxious. But with sexuality, there was complete mastery of the experience, which would make that more appealing. How do those two, the weed and the pornography, compare to alcohol?
Well, I think it's just more so in the middle, and I can control how much I drink, in a sense.
Okay.
So I can, I guess, control how far gone I am.
Okay.
So in that aspect, I do have some sort of control.
Okay. And that was pleasurable.
Yes, and alcohol is definitely pleasurable, a way to escape.
And the smoking. How, of those 4 things, where would that have fit in compared to the other 3?
I think that was more of I got into it because of social reasons, and then that was more of, it was just a stress reliever. Like, I would be really stressed out at work, and instantly I would smoke a cigarette and feel better, feel calmer.
You're actually illustrating a principle, which is when people are involved with different addictive behaviors, they never have one. They have 1, 2, or 3, or 4, depending on what is the emotional state they're working with. And they end up learning to use those addictive behaviors rather skillfully. So you could select this one for this and that one for that. Well, thank you. We're going to look at the next segment of the teaching and build on this principle of pain plus pleasure equals addiction. The formula that we're using is pain plus pleasure equals addiction. When a person gets caught up in what we call the addictive cycle, anesthesia sets in. They begin to forget the good experiences of life, and their heart and their mind just cycles around the chemical bath that the addiction is creating for them. But this series is here to encourage you to step beyond temptation, compulsion, and addiction. Step out of that anesthesia, and you'll discover the joy of being the person that God intended you to be. Right now, if you're struggling with temptation, compulsion, and addiction, all you are aware of is your weaknesses, and that's a tragedy.
As you step out of that anesthesia, you'll discover your strengths, you'll discover depth, you'll discover aspects of your personality that you've never known. Psalm says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Fearfully refers to the fact that we are worthy of deep respect as persons, how we've been woven together. And that wonderfully actually is the word for miraculous. There is just something miraculous about being a human being. And when we step out of the anesthesia, we'll discover the wonder of what God has intended us to be. But also, we'll discover something about pain and the value of it. Pain is like a gruff but affectionate uncle who comes to us and says, you got to do this, you got to be aware of that, you've got to meet this challenge. Pain wakes us up to address the issues of life. And pain will become a good thing to us as we address the message that it brings. Matthew chapter 5, verse 4 talks about pain. And it says, blessed are those who are mourning, those who are in pain, for they shall be comforted. Another value of dealing straightforwardly with pain is that we'll discover that the comfort of God goes deeper than the pain that we are in. We have to leave that anesthesia behind us and step into the health that God has for us.
Sasha has come out of the anesthesia that goes with addictive behavior. And as she was sharing her story, there were obviously some ironies that she pointed out. But there is also a very, very nice irony that we're going to see in her story.
My best friends and I relationship when we became best friends, we were extremely close and we had a lot of things in common. We were both attracted to, at times or whatever, the same sex. We were both extremely sexual. I didn't get involved with her, and I think that we both definitely, it was completely off limits. I mean, we would never even hug. It was just safer in the mind. My close friend became a Christian when she was 17. I think it's amazing that God, He loves me unconditionally, even though I feel so screwed up. And He knows me so well. And it's hard to believe, but I think that that's amazing.
Sasha, do you have something that you'd like to share with young women who may have your background and who may have had your life experience?
Find somebody that you're really, really comfortable with and tell them about it. You'll find other people that are a lot like you, and it doesn't make you feel so alone.
So when a person's in pain, they'll do things to relieve the pain. And if they beat themselves up over that, they're misunderstanding the whole deal. There's a legitimate reason for the pain. And there's legitimate need of the heart to get out of the pain. And so that's something that nobody should beat themselves up over. But at the same time, they need to get out of that isolation, and they need to get to people they can trust. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
You said it so well. Thank you, Sasha, for the story that you've shared. It's not a comfortable one. I was glancing at your face as you were looking at the video, and there were moments of discomfort for you. In the next session, we'll be telling Scott's story. Scott, what were the different addictive behaviors that you were struggling with?
My addictive behaviors growing up were smoking, cutting, and drinking.
Of the interviews, there's 13 interviews involved with this series. To my surprise, 3 of the 13 were actually involved in cutting. 2 were women and 1 is yourself. And in a sense, you're a rare bird because it's only 1 out of 20 cutters who are male. Thanks. So we'll look forward to hearing your story, and thank you again, Sasha.